Well, this is gonna be fun. After Spider-Man 4 was canceled, Sony decided they were going to reboot the Spider-Man franchise with a completely new team. Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire, Kirsten Dunst, gone. So what they did is they hired the director of the movie 500 Days of Summer, Marc Webb, by the way, fantastic last name for directing a Spider-Man movie, to direct the new movie. The script would be written by James Vanderbilt, Stephen Kloves, and Alvin Sargent, the man behind Spider-Man 2. Lifelong Spider-Man fan Andrew Garfield was set to star as Peter Parker, with Emma Stone playing Gwen Stacy. The trailers and the posters teased a much grittier and more realistic take on the character. And on July 3rd, 2012, The Amazing Spider-Man was released worldwide. The Amazing Spider-Man is a reboot of the Spider-Man franchise that dives into his origin yet again. And this movie is pretty controversial. In some cases for very valid reasons, in some cases not for valid reasons. There are a lot of people who love this movie, and there are a lot of people who do not love this movie, but recently I've started to notice a lot of people are starting to love this movie and the second one, and I think it's going through the prequels treatment. This happens with franchises. Basically, Star Wars prequels were hated until the sequels came out, and now everyone's starting to love the prequels and what they were doing, and I think this is the same way. These movies were not loved. Tobey Maguire movies were loved. The Andrew Garfield ones were not, but now that we're getting Tom Holland and MCU Spider-Man, and people have thoughts on that, what Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movies were trying to do, people are starting to respect that more, really starting to like these movies more. Now, I gotta be honest with you guys. I love this movie. I have always loved this movie. I am one of the people, from the moment I walked out of the theater up until now, I have always loved The Amazing Spider-Man. I liked it before it was cool to like it. I'm one of those people. I've been on this movie's side since day one. The first thing that has to be talked about with this movie and any Spider-Man movie really is Peter Parker, who in this movie is played by Andrew Garfield. And people have a lot of thoughts on Andrew Garfield as Spider-Man. Some people criticize him, but a lot of times people just complain about how the character was written. And I understand why some people may not like this. The argument is that he seems too cool to be Peter, and I get where those people are coming from. He does seem a little too cool. He skateboards in school, he gets scolded by the teachers, and then when they're not looking, he starts skateboarding again. He's got a tiny bit of an attitude problem. He is, just way too hot to be playing Peter Parker. I get it, I understand the criticism, but I think people are too quick to point out what's wrong with this Peter, that they don't look at everything that is right about this Peter. Because in a way, this is the most accurate to source material Peter Parker we have gotten. Peter Parker, in this movie, is very socially awkward. He struggles to talk to people, he kind of stutters along through his sentences, he mumbles when he's in an uncomfortable conversation. And that's with everyone, not just people like Captain Stacy. That's just how he talks in general to people that he's not super comfortable around, like Aunt May or Uncle Ben, or when he's trying to stand up for someone like he is with the bully that, like he is with Flash when Flash is bullying someone. He's awkward, he's kind of reserved, he's a bit shy, and personally, I think that's Peter Parker. He also doesn't really have many friends. He seems like an outcast. What he seems like, he doesn't seem like a Peter who's too cool. He seems like a Peter who's trying to be cool. And if you say that that's inaccurate, you clearly were homeschooled, because everyone at some point in their lives tried to be cool to fit in more in school and with those cooler people. Everyone has done that at least once in their lives, and you're lying if you haven't. If you have not done that, you're either lying or you were homeschooled your entire life. And that's what Peter Parker did in this movie. And the people who claim that's not Peter Parker, or that's not accurate, or we can't sympathize with that Peter, you are wrong all over the place, because I almost sympathize with this Peter more than any of the other two. And Peter also tries to do the right thing. He refuses to take a picture of someone getting humiliated because it's just not the right thing to do. Most people would eat that shit up. If there was someone who was being held upside down with their face in spaghetti, there are a bunch of kids who would be laughing, eating that up, and taking pictures. But Peter Parker doesn't do that. In the first 10 minutes of this movie, what we learn about Peter Parker, his traits, his character, the most Peter Parker things imaginable. So when people say he's too cool, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. Because I think I resonate with this Peter Parker more than the other Peter Parkers. And I'm not a skater, I'm not a photographer, I'm not even that good of a YouTuber, but I still feel more closely aligned with Andrew Garfield Peter Parker than Toby or Tom. And I just gotta say, as if you need more evidence that this is the most realistic Peter, just watch the scene of him asking out Gwen.
You want to, I don't know.
Want to what?
I don't know. Just, I don't know, or we could do something else, or we could, if you don't, we could...
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, either one.
There's something I want to talk about, because there's a scene in this movie where Peter, after he gets his powers, he proceeds to humiliate Flash Thompson in a public setting. And a lot of people take issue with that scene. But funny enough, people don't take issue with Tobey Spider-Man humiliating Flash in the original Spider-Man movie. And I wonder why that is. Because Peter humiliating Flash is not unique to this Peter Parker. The whole point of the great power, great responsibility speech is because Peter starts out by using his great power, but having no responsibility. He humiliates Flash in the original, people let him off the hook, but he humiliates Flash in this one, and it is the end of the known world as we know it. Burn down Sony, boycott the movie, why are we watching this? This is a stupid decision. Pick something else to complain about. And if you're going to complain about him doing it in Amazing Spider-Man, you better be complaining about him doing it in the original Spider-Man. And speaking of Gwen Stacy is played by Emma Stone, who is amazing in the movie, and her chemistry with Andrew Garfield is incredible. Probably because they were actually a thing at the time. Their on-screen and off-screen chemistry was great, and I think Gwen Stacy, of the three love interests we've seen in movies, and no, you know what, period, I think Gwen Stacy's my favorite Spider-Man love interest in any form of media, probably, but I will say in the movies, I think Gwen Stacy's my favorite one. Something I always liked about Gwen in these movies is that she's never put in the damsel in distress role, really. I mean, she is in Amazing Spider-Man 2 at the end, but that comes after she helps Peter. I think a strength of this Spider-Man is how closely she's helping out Spider-Man, you know? She helps with the cure for Lizard. She helps him figure out how to beat Electro. Then she actually helps beat Electro, right? She's kind of there with him the whole time. They're working together. It's a little dynamic they have. And I like that. And it looks like we're getting that in No Way Home. It looks like MJ and Ned are going to be helping Peter very closely. Thank God. I love when they do that. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is when he's skateboarding in like that abandoned warehouse thing while Till Kingdom Come plays, and he watches the spider like jump or swing between parts of its web, and then he does that on chains, and like that's how he learns how to web swing, and he starts to wall crawl there. I think it's so cool how he gets his powers, I will say. Him learning how to get his powers, great scene, and also I think this is my favorite on-screen representation of Spidey sense. The scene right when he, like the morning after he gets bit and he's sweating in his room and his senses are just going crazy, is exactly how it will go down. So Andrew Garfield is controversial outside the suit, but how about inside the suit? Not a lot of criticism there. I think a lot of people think that when Andrew Garfield puts the suit on, he's pretty solid inside that suit. And yeah, the suit looks like a basketball, but you know what? I don't care. It's a good-looking basketball. I think part of the reason I like the suit so much is just because of how handmade it is. Like, yeah, it still seems unreasonable for a teenager to make, but in a world where a guy can climb up walls and swing between webs, and his villains are a guy with 4 tentacle arms, and a guy who throws pumpkin bombs, and then a dude who has a goo that comes out of his body and looks a lot like Spider-Man, and a dude made out of sand, and a dude made out of water. How realistic his suit is not going to be my issue. But I always like it. The shoes are made out of tennis shoes that he modified. The lenses are... he took out sunglass lenses and plopped them in there, and then he just ordered a thing of latex and kind of just played with it and modified it a bit. And I like the damage. Like, it gets damaged throughout the movie, and the damage stays there because he's not repairing it constantly. So it gets scratched, and throughout the movie, the gash across the suit is there the whole time. But here's something the movie gets a lot of hate for. Why Peter Parker becomes Spider-Man. A character arc is the transformation or inner journey of a character over the course of a story. If a story has a character arc, the character begins as one sort of person and gradually transforms into a different sort of person in response to changing developments in the story. Peter wants revenge for Uncle Ben's death, and then he puts on a mask to go get revenge for Uncle Ben. And then once he actually gets the Spider-Man suit, his motive doesn't change. He keeps hunting down people who have the kind of description of Uncle Ben's killer, and in an attempt to find Uncle Ben's killer. His entire goal is selfish. He becomes a vigilante out of revenge, but he does not become Spider-Man. He is not the hero the moment he puts the suit on. He then goes to Gwen's house for dinner and argues with Captain Stacy about whether Spider-Man is good or bad, and that totally changes his entire perspective. Then he and Gwen make out on the roof, and the next scene is Lizard is on a bridge just destroying a bunch of cars and like throwing people over the side, and he's about to kill people. And Peter swings in, and he saves all of them, and he saves this kid from this burning car. And once the kids return to his dad, the dad asks who he is, and Peter says,
Spider-Man.
And that's when he officially becomes Spider-Man, when he started saving people for selfless reasons, when he started being selfless. And that's why he stopped hunting Uncle Ben's killer. Finding Uncle Ben's killer doesn't matter. Preventing it from ever happening again is what matters, and being there for the people of New York is what matters. And that's what Peter learns throughout the course of this movie. So then at the end of the movie, when all those people have the cranes out that he can swing across them to go fight Lizard and save New York, he is a full-fledged superhero. And that, my friends, is what we call a character arc. And I said this talking about Spider-Man 1, that the movie, it has so much character to it. Like, every corner of the world feels rich. This is the same way. Now, I love me some Cliff Robertson as Uncle Ben, but I think Martin Sheen is my favorite on-screen Uncle Ben. I mean, of the two, he's my favorite Uncle Ben, and I think Sally Field is a good Aunt May. Rosemary Harris will always hold the title of Best Aunt May to me. I don't ever see that changing. But Sally Field is a very solid Aunt May. I also think she's like the perfect age. Like, I know in the comics Aunt May always supposed to kind of seem like a grandma, but I don't know. It always seems unrealistic because Aunt would be Mom's sister, so realistically she should be closer in age to Peter's mom than she should to Peter's grandma, right? So I think Sally Field is kind of I always thought the perfect age for Aunt May. And something this movie does is there's so much Aunt May and Uncle Ben before Uncle Ben gets shot. We get to see so much of that dynamic that when Uncle Ben dies and it cuts back to Aunt May, whoo! And one more side character I want to talk about is Flash Thompson, because Flash Thompson is amazing in this movie. He actually has a full character arc in like the 4 scenes he has. He starts out as the bully. He punches Peter Parker. And then he gets humiliated by Peter. And then after Uncle Ben dies, he's the first person who goes to console Peter. And Peter thinks Flash is going to be an asshole, but Flash is just there to be Peter's friend. And then at the end of the movie, they are mates. And there's a deleted scene in Amazing Spider-Man 2 when they graduate where Flash hugs Peter. Flash is so good in these movies. He's been done so dirty by the MCU. But I do need to say that one of the most disappointing thing, no, the most disappointing thing in this movie is the Lizard, the villain of this movie. I don't know. Like, he starts out with a very solid motive, and as the movie goes on, he just becomes a worse and worse villain, and they should have just fleshed him out more. The issue with the Lizard is he has this great setup, but Sony had, like, all of his stuff removed. It was all taken out of the movie for the most part. So he just shows up every, like, half hour, does something, and leaves. Lizard is a very inactive character in the film. You know, something that was great about Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man Homecoming is that the villain is a very active character in the film. Well, I mean, Spider-Man 2, not Spider-Man 3, that had too much going on, but both MCU Spider-Mans, the villain is a very active character in the movie. He's a very important character. Lizard's not. He's just kind of there. Like I said, Captain Stacy is really the main villain of the film, it feels like. And speaking of Captain Stacy, dude's got a bomb-ass character arc. He goes from hunting Spider-Man the entire movie to helping Spider-Man beat Lizard to sacrificing himself so Spider-Man can save New York. That's cool. But as I said, Lizard has an amazing setup. Kurt Connors is missing an arm. He wants his arm back. And also, Norman Osborn is dying, who's not in this movie, by the way. There's a lot of hype over Norman Osborn, but he's not even in the movie. But Irfan Khan, R.I.P., comes in, and he's like, Norman Osborn is dying. I'm not gonna do the accent. Why did I do that? He's like, Norman Osborn is dying. We need a cure for what he has. And then Kurt Connors tested on himself to regrow his arm, and he's just so happy when his arm comes back. And then he turns into a giant lizard. And it's sad. So he turns into Lizard for certain scenes. He kind of goes back and forth until he permanently turns into him near the end of the movie, and then that gives Gwen something to do so she can create a cure at the end. And I think the single coolest thing about Lizard in this movie, which I wish they had built on more and fleshed out more, is that Peter is at least partially responsible for creating Lizard, and that's why in the movie he says,
I gotta stop him, though. I have to, because I created him.
Because Peter is the one who figured out the formula that Kurt then used that turned him into a lizard. So there is such a personal connection between Spidey and Lizard, but so much of it is taken out of the movie in favor of just having Lizard be a just punching bag for Spider-Man. Spider-Man and Lizard don't even have an interaction until 90 minutes into the movie. Now, they do earlier than that because there's the bit in the sewer, but I don't really count it because Spidey just makes a bunch of webs, and then Lizard comes in, he scratches him, they fall into the water, and then they split. And that's it. But their first, true fight, their first encounter is the fight in the school. 90 minutes in. Which means that the villain that Peter helped create doesn't even fight Peter until over halfway through the movie, people. He just disappears for giant chunks of the movie, shows up to inconvenience Peter, then leaves. He is so unbelievably inactive in this movie. And the worst part is that they take all this setup and motivation, and they strip it all away and throw it all out when he becomes the Lizard. You know his plan in the final battle? His plan is to spread his lizard gas through all of New York, so everyone in New York becomes lizard people. Where was the shift? When did the shift happen between Kurt Connors to full-on Lizard? Because they changed, and Lizard's very mustache twirling, and his motivation's all gone. Where was the character shift? Where did that happen, Sony? Where was it? Tell me. But you know what a neat touch is? At the end of the movie, Kurt Connors saves Peter with his real arm, not his lizard arm. It's the human part of him that saves him. That's some Alvin Sargent writing right there, and you can tell. Let's take a break from talking about characters because I want to talk about something in this film that has not been topped 9 years later, and I doubt will ever be topped, and that is the web swinging. The web swinging in this movie is God status web swinging. Every scene when he's just amazing. The crane scene is cool, but I think my favorite one is always the swing at the end, just kind of their take on the ending single shot swings from the Sam Raimi movies. Andrew Garfield gets one of those in this movie, and it is a sight to behold. It's gorgeous. Looks so good. I wouldn't be surprised if the PS4 game took its inspiration from Amazing Spider-Man. If someone tells me I have 2 minutes to live, I'm going to spend the first minute telling my family I love them, and I'm going to spend the last minute watching Andrew Garfield Spider-Man swing through New York. I love it that much. Now let's talk about 2 things I don't like about this movie. First one's pretty significant, and that is Richard and Mary Parker. This movie decides to open with a flashback of Peter's parents leaving the house in a hurry and leaving him with Aunt May and Uncle Ben. And there's like this little hint, there's a little spider in a jar, which is gonna be, that's gonna be a talking point in the next one, that's for sure. Then they leave, movie starts to continue on, and then Peter finds his dad's bag in the basement, and he gets into it, and he sees, you know, his dad was like a hotshot at Oscorp, and his dad was probably up to something big. Then the movie drops it, and just goes on with its day. The movie doesn't shove this subplot down our throats as hard as they do in The Amazing Spider-Man 2, but I hate this subplot, just plain and simple. I don't give a shit what happened to Peter's parents. Alright? They don't need to flesh that out at all. I don't care. Just let it go. Just ignore it. They're just gone. They're just dead. They're just dead, and it's just Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Why can't we just have that? Why do we have to go so in-depth on this Richard Parker murder mystery that in the second film takes the most important part of Peter Parker and throws it away in favor of doing a Chosen One plotline? Why did you have to do that? And the second thing I strongly dislike in this movie is not the ending. The ending I think is well done, but there's one thing about the ending I don't like, and that's Peter backtracking on his promise to Captain Stacy.
Make promises you can't keep, Mr. Parker.
Yeah, but those are the best kind.
Okay, class, open your books. Let's begin on page 1.
I think it's kind of weird that Peter Parker he's like, hey, your dad didn't want me to be with you because he didn't want me to put you in harm's way, and he actively avoids being with Gwen because of that. But then 5 minutes later, he's like, all right, Gwen, we tight. We're dating again. We're a thing. And then, why? Like, it gets a little chuckle out of the audience, but I feel like it wasn't necessary. Just have them say broken up at the end. Worked out when they did it in the last movie. By last movie, I mean original Spider-Man. The last first movie. And then you get that also results in this on-again, off-again thing in Amazing Spider-Man 2 because he has to break up with her at the start of the movie, which brings in so much drama that we didn't need to rehash. He has to break up with her in the first act of the movie and then get back with her at the end of the movie so she can die a miserable death. Just end this movie with them broken up. You don't need to do that. That backtracking on the promise. I really like The Amazing Spider-Man, and the more I watch it, the more I like it. This is it's in my top 3 live-action Spider-Man movies. It's 4th place total, because Into the Spider-Verse is one of the greatest comic book movies ever made. So it's not a perfect movie by any means, but it's a good one. I am going to give The Amazing Spider-Man a B. It's funny watching Amazing Spider-Man because for a movie marketed as The Untold Story, it does a great job of telling a story that's already been told. Alright guys, there you have it. There's my review of The Amazing Spider-Man. What do you think of the movie? What did you think of my review? Let me know all that down in the comments below. Also leave a like on this video, subscribe, click on the bell icon to receive all notifications from the MCHQ. That's going to be it. Have a great day, guys.